Okay. Uh, let's talk about violence. Nothing personal. Nothing to be alarmed about. Of course, everything I do on here is something to be alarmed about. So that's not much of a promise. Violence. All right. In particular, violence in the Earth dynamic system. I talk about the Earth system here a lot. It's not something most people can understand. You have the same relationship to the Earth dynamic system that a fish has to water. You're, you know, you're basically swimming in the atmosphere. You don't think of it that way. Uh, but that's sort of what's happening. Everything that comes to a fish in the water. And everything that comes to you, certainly weather-wise, comes to you via the atmosphere. Now, the Earth dynamic system is composed of many systems, all of which are in motion, constant motion. That's why it's called a dynamic system. It's not static. The behavior over time can be somewhat predictable. That's not the same as static, by the way. A brick sitting on top of another brick is static. That's what we mean by a static system. The Earth system has nothing to do with one brick stacked on another. Okay, it's in constant motion. Every part of it is in constant motion. The winds are moving, and the winds are moving in different directions, and the winds even cross each other. And sometimes the winds go in circles, and then the circles move across the landscape. The oceans, all the rivers, everything moves constantly. Ocean currents, and sometimes currents cross each other. Sometimes currents stop, and then they restart. Even the land itself is in motion. Plate tectonics, mountain building, mountain erosion, right? Beaches being eroded by waves and wind and currents. It's there's nothing static about the Earth. It's in constant motion. And, it's like a herd of zebra or wildebeest. No, they have a purpose in their motion, and their motions are kind of random, but the herd sort of moves in a direction, and that can become predictable. It's sort of slow and sedate, and so we don't think of it. We don't think of the Earth dynamic system as being in any way unpredictable or violent, but it is becoming violent. The Earth dynamic system, which is typified as being in motion. That's what it is. It is in motion. That motion is becoming violent. I think I used violent in a video first here, maybe a couple of months ago, or maybe it was only in conversation, but I've begun using the word violence to describe what's happening to the Earth system that we live in, that we move through, that moves over us, and that we are embedded in, like a fish is embedded in water. I've begun using the word violence to describe it. Events of the last few weeks have really brought that home to me. I mean, the fact that I was noticing it and beginning to comment on it 6 months ago, it doesn't really surprise me. I have long whiskers, okay? So in the other sense, I have long whiskers, and I, I I can kind of sense things before I even know what it is. And then later I start to build a narrative about, okay, what is this that has come to my attention? So about 6 months ago, I started talking about the Earth becoming violent. I have mentioned on this channel a couple of times in different videos, hypercanes. Start thinking about hypercanes. Hypercanes are a theoretical thing. Look it up, hypercane, not hurricane, hypercane. Look it up. Wikipedia has a nice write-up on it. Hypercane. It's all theoretical and it's all possible. And it's just, the conditions to create hypercanes are just really way out there. And it's like, it really is theoretical. And it's only mathematically possible and blah, blah, blah. Start thinking about hypercanes. Hypercanes are exceedingly violent. They are violent on a scale that boggles the mind. We are getting hurricanes that are violent on a scale that boggles the mind. How does the Earth system, the Earth dynamic system, express itself in violence? And I'll just cut this short. I'll tell you what it is. The Earth system moves through currents. It's a dynamic system, and it moves through currents. The currents that matter to us most here are the ocean currents and the currents in the wind, in the air, which we call, for convenience, wind. We knew there were winds before we knew there were air currents. Later on, we've discovered the currents in the air, the rivers of air, and we began naming them because they were persistent and obvious. We could take advantage of them. We had the westerly winds, we had the trade winds, we have the jet streams. There's 4 of them at least, 2 in each hemisphere, 2 in the north and 2 in the south. And these are currents, rivers, if you like, in the atmosphere. And they have a lot of energy, and that's why they're persistent. And they're driven by heating of the planet from the sun, which is persistent. And they're currents of air. There's also currents in the oceans. And the Earth dynamic system, dynamic means in motion. The dynamic system is in motion through these currents, okay? As the Earth dynamic system accumulates energy, the energy manifests itself as motion through the things that are already moving, and that includes the wind, right? Some data points. Hawaii just recently had a wildfire. It was unbelievable. All of these events are described by what we call superlatives: unbelievable, incredible, impossible, never before experienced, couldn't understand it, don't think it's possible. How did this happen? Okay. The events I'm describing are all described with those kinds of superlatives. What just happened? How was that possible? I've never seen that before. How could this happen? Okay. There was a wildfire in Hawaii that was unbelievable. Never happened before. Unexpected. Came out of nowhere. Moved like a freight train. Okay. Because of winds. They're having a drought and the vegetation was dry and there was a spark, and whatever it was caused it to spark, the whatever. But what made it unbelievable was the wind that drove it. We had fires here in California, up in the north, in a town called Paradise. The town is still there, but the town burned almost completely to the ground. A fire came through, and it came through from a place that's pretty far away. Actually, you can't even get there from Paradise. And it came on so fast. Nobody understood what was happening. There was no warning. There was no way to escape. 89 people died in their cars trying to outrun it. In their cars, died, burned to death in their cars. Swept through the town, burned everything it could get to, burned the hospitals, burned the schools, burned the downtown, burned communities. Everything burned, and 89 people died in their cars. Unbelievable violence. The small community of Capitola, right down the coast from where I am now, has been virtually utterly destroyed twice, 2 years running, 2 years in a row, twice, by enormous, unbelievable, never before seen waves. Ocean waves coming in from the Pacific. Now, the Pacific is called the Pacific Ocean because when sailors came here, they found it to be very pacified. The Atlantic is violent. The North Atlantic, the South Atlantic, they get hurricanes. Well, when they came to the Pacific Ocean, they were really impressed. They even called it the Pacific Ocean. It's pacified. And we have lots of communities here in California, coastal communities up and down the coast that have been there for hundreds of years. Haven't seen conditions like this. Unbelievable, unexpected, unprecedented. Couldn't prepare, couldn't run away, couldn't get away. Waves so high, they look like mountains. And when they hit the shore, they just came into the town, washed the cars away, washed away the front doors. It blew through the front doors, going through town, blowing out the front doors, knocking all the patios over, wrenching buildings off their foundations. Waves, waves in communities that have been there for hundreds of years. Wealthy communities, beachfront properties, $1 million homes. Front doors bashed in by the waves. Cars floated away. It was on the news all up and down California. There are, I don't want some cliffside communities. There are residential areas that have been built on cliffs over the Pacific Ocean in California, coastal California. I have to make all these statements because oceanside property in California tends not to be beaches. And in Southern California, yes, there are some really nice beaches, and there are houses on the beach, and you can have a house on the beach. But pretty much anywhere north of, I want to say Santa Cruz, maybe even including Santa Cruz, maybe north of Monterey, there are cliffs. There's no beach. I mean, there's a beach. It's 20 feet deep, and then it's just cliffs up from there, right? And access is really hard to get any access at all. And sometimes there's stairs or whatever else that they might be providing to our beach. Okay, but there's houses up there on those cliffs. Pretty regularly these days, we're getting news items, people, weeping and our fate is so terrible because the cliffs are falling into the sea. The cliffs are falling into the sea, and they built on the cliff, right, which goes way, way back, right into the foothills. So they thought they were doing the right thing. So they built on the near the cliff. The cliff goes down 200 feet to the little narrow beach and hence to the sea. And they built there, and they've been there 40 years, and now those houses are falling into the sea, and this is happening very suddenly. Now these cliffs, these 200-foot high cliffs, are being eroded into the sea and taking the houses with them. And sometimes they have enough advance notice that the house is going to fall into the sea that they can demolish it and haul it away, and then there's nothing really goes in the sea. But more recently, houses just go in the sea. Apartment blocks, houses, roads, they just fall into the sea. And people get out as quickly as they can, oh man, I'm getting out of here. But then 2 weeks later, the house falls in the sea. The whole thing. No warning, essentially, no warning. Except that last year, somebody else's house fell in the sea a mile down the coast. Okay. So why is this happening? Why are the houses now suddenly falling into the sea? Well, that's because the cliff is falling into the sea. And why is the cliff falling into the sea? And why are huge lengths of cliff, and I don't mean length high, I mean length depth. You built your house 200 feet from the cliff, and today you're now on the cliff. Okay, how is 200 feet of 200-foot high cliff, 200 feet of 200-foot high cliff, how is that going away? Violence. There are waves coming ashore, wind-driven waves coming ashore on California's coast. California's rocky coast. We're not talking about losing sandy beaches to erosion. We're talking about losing rocky coast. And the waves are so huge. We still call it the Pacific Ocean, but the waves now are so huge. They're taking out these enormous cliffs and they're falling into the sea. And Capitola was destroyed twice, 2 years in a row by heavy, heavy surf, flooding, and high waves. Right now, in fact, partly what stimulated me to make this video right now was headlines that the UK is gearing up for yet another named storm coming ashore in the UK and Europe. I think they're up to Isha, which I think is nine named storms so far. They name their storms. These aren't hurricanes. They're storms. They name their storms. Here in the US, we don't do that. We name our hurricanes. Naming storms in the UK and Europe, they do it together is somewhat controversial. Oh, by the way, they don't all get the same name for some reason. So you have to be a little careful about naming storms or following named storms over there. But they do it, and it's a bit controversial because people over there think, you're just bringing attention to these storms. You're naming them and you're petting them like they're your friend, and and now we're all worried about our named storms. No, that's not what's happening. They're naming the storms because they are so violent. They need to be able to talk about them. They need to be able to talk about, well, there was this storm on Monday and there was this storm on Thursday. And then the following Tuesday, there was another one. And there's three different storms. We can't have these running all together as if they're one storm. Now there's nine. There's nine storms. Okay. They've named them all. They can talk about them all. There's nine storms. And if you're just looking at the headlines, you might think there was maybe one or two because they come so close together now. But now that they're naming them, see what happens? They can talk about them. They have nine named storms. And these are, they're just storms that are coming in off the North Atlantic, and they are violent. They're violent. Why do we name hurricanes? Because they're violent. And they're going to do damage, and we want to be able to talk about it. If nothing else, FEMA needs to be able to talk about it. So which hurricane did you get? Oh, we got Ida, or we got Freddie, or we got Bobby, or whatever it was. Okay, well, here's paperwork for hurricane. Which one was it again? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, Bobby. All right. And so here's your paperwork for Hurricane Bobby. And excuse me, I have to go talk to your other neighbor down the way who 2 weeks ago was wiped out by Hurricane Freddie. Okay, so you're Bobby. Okay, but this other guy, okay, he's Freddie. They have to name these things. They have to name them. Like we name serial killers so we can talk about them. Violence. It's a thing. A few months ago, about 6 months ago, maybe this is when I started talking about violence. A few months ago, something bad happened in the Antarctica. They lost sea ice. The Antarctic sea ice has been relatively stable all the time that the Arctic sea ice has been highly dynamic. And we've been watching that one closely and expecting it to, frankly, disappear at some point, and maybe even disappear forever at some point. And there's been discussion of which year is the Arctic sea ice going to disappear, possibly forever. And this one have grave, enormous impacts on the Earth dynamic system if the Arctic sea ice was no longer ice, meaning it was gone. Okay, I could talk about that. Maybe I will a little later, but it would be really bad if the Arctic sea ice just went away. And there's like a death watch on the Arctic sea ice. But all the time that there's been this death watch on the Arctic sea ice, is this the year? Oh, maybe not. Oh, phew, dodged a bullet. Okay. The Antarctic sea ice has been relatively stable until recently, last year. Their summer, I say last year, being very specific here. Their summer is our northern hemisphere. Our winter in the northern hemisphere, focuses around January, February, right? That's the dead of winter. Down there, southern hemisphere, that's the peak of summer for them. So not surprising. February-ish of 2022, they had a record low sea ice event in the Antarctica. So that's a lot to string together, right? We don't never think about the southern hemisphere. Our winter is their summer, and they had a sea ice minimum that they have never seen before. Never seen it before. It was like impossible. It must be an error. There must be a data error. There must be a satellite data error, or someone got the wrong measurements, or someone shuffled up a bunch of spreadsheets and got the wrong numbers in the columns or whatever. Must be wrong. It's just got to be wrong. It has to be wrong. Well, no, it wasn't wrong. It was observations. And they had a record low sea ice. And record lows like, oh, look, this might be a little more has melted this year than last year. That's interesting. I wonder if that's a trend. We'll have to wait and see next year. No, it was so much sea ice vanished from the Antarctica. The people were like this. That's how they were. That Edvard Munch, right? The Scream, the painting, right? The guy standing on the bridge and he's doing this. That's how the people were studying the sea ice in the Antarctic. They were like this. I was too. When I saw the data, I was like, what? What is that? That isn't possible. Okay, fine. It happened. But the happening part isn't possible. So something broke. Something is broke. And that's my interpretation of it. Even back then, I don't know what it was, 6 months or so ago, when the data came out, which is not the same thing as, when the data actually happened. Yeah, there's always a lag. So it was essentially February data, but we got news of it last summer. And I was like, okay, that's not right. That's not right. I can tell you that's not right. And that's not El Nino, and that's not record sea temperatures, and that's not any of those things. That's just not right. And people were saying, the pundits, of course, the meteorologists, guys, get a clue, okay? The meteorologists were like, oh, well, that's El Nino. No, it's not. We got a lot of data on the Antarctic sea ice, okay? And there's lots of El Ninos in that data. And none of those El Ninos did that. That is not El Nino. Yeah, we have an El Nino, but that is not El Nino. That's something else. And that is not record ocean temperatures. That's something else. I don't know what that is. Something broke. That's how I interpreted it. Something has broken. Something is broken. And that broken thing may or may not come back. It may or may not fix itself. It may or may not be fixable. So today, after I had heard about the 9th named storm coming ashore in the UK, life-threatening named storm coming ashore in the UK, bringing life-ending conditions in the UK 9 times in about 9 weeks. Okay, the 9th one, then my wife and I caught a video put out by Paul Beckwith where he's talking about the massive destruction of a ice feature in the area of what used to be Larsen B. That's a lot of gobbledygook, okay? Doesn't matter. The key here is that they know what happened. This time they were watching. Yeah, this time they're watching. Oh yeah, they're watching. They're starting to be very careful about watching everything all the time down there because something bad is happening in the Antarctica, okay? And they're watching now. Oh, you better believe they're watching now. They are watching every little thing. And it was violence. Wave action came in, and in 10 days, it always happens when you're not looking. See, if you look away, you go on a vacation, you come back and it's gone. It's like, what the hell just happened? Okay, well, this time they were watching. This time when someone went on vacation, someone came in to take their place. And this time they were watching. And over 10 days, they watched it blow itself to pieces. And it wasn't melting, and it wasn't Jewish space lasers. It was wave action. It was violence. Violence in the atmosphere. Violence. It broke it to pieces mechanically. Didn't melt it, didn't move it around, didn't blow it out to sea. Broke it to pieces. A huge ice shelf ice that had come down from the land, from the glaciers. It had been physically destroyed. Physically destroyed. It's gone. 10 days. Boom. Gone. Bye. Nice knowing you. Violence. I think we're going to be using that word a lot going forward. Now, people still, this is about global heating. People still talk about, oh yeah, global heating. That's going to be a problem because, we're going to have some hot days and people don't have air conditioning. And even if they did have air conditioning, it's a load on the power grid, and we need more power, and that means more generation stations, and that means more coal and natural gas, which is not going to help us because that's our problem right now, burning coal and natural gas to make electricity. We're doing too much of that already, apparently. And and then that's going to lead to sea level rise, and the sea level rise is going to take a long time, but eventually we can show you maps of Florida with the sea rising and covering the southern parts of Florida, and they can show you pictures of drawings, renderings, artistic renderings of Miami under water and the buildings down under the surface, and the fish swimming around through the windows of the old buildings, and they could sea level rise and melting the ice and all this stuff. And of course it's going to take hundreds of years, and we'll have plenty of time to move people, and we'll uproot everybody in Miami and all these places down there in the southern half of my Florida. And we'll move them someplace else. Yeah, like that's going to work. Yeah, I got two legs. Pull the other one, right? Sure, you're going to uproot those people. Yeah, right. Oh, but it's going to take hundreds of years, so it doesn't matter. It's going to be fine. Well, we have plenty of time to figure it out. Okay. I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, maybe I'm conspiratorial. Maybe I'm connecting things that aren't supposed to be connected, but I'm noticing. Yeah, it's fairly obvious, really, frankly, to anybody who's willing to notice, and for anybody who's a system scientist like myself, who takes things whole. I want to see the whole thing, okay? Who can connect a lot of dots. And I'm connecting dots, and I'm noticing that the ocean surface is becoming violent. Now, the Earth dynamic system has always been in motion. That's why it's called a dynamic system. It's always been in motion. And the winds are part of how the heat gets redistributed and the air masses move around. And, for the most part, we understand how that works. Sometimes we get something really exciting like a hurricane, and it does its thing and comes ashore, and the trees are bent over, and the reporter trying to report in the wind and the 80-mile-an-hour wind. And, that's all very exciting and all that. But I think our understanding of the extremes of violence that the Earth system is capable of, that understanding, that sense of normalcy, that there's a certain level of violence that's normal, and therefore, that we can endure it. I mean, we have insurance policies, right? That's why we have insurance. So if something unusual but kind of normal happens, and you're the one who gets stuck in the crosshairs this time, and your porch gets ripped off the back of your house, and your boat gets capsized in the bay, and your street gets leveled. Well, that's why we have insurance, right? The insurance companies pay for it, and whatnot. It's fine. But there are now signs. There are signs, if you're just willing to look at them. And I'm a system scientist, so that's my gig, right? I'm looking for the signs. That's what I do. And the signs are a coming violence. It's getting violent out there. It's getting violent out there. Now, one of the signs of increasing violence in the Earth system has been kind of a slow-moving train wreck here in California. And this is really important. And there's another slow train wreck happening in Florida and in other parts of the East Coast. And there's a slow train wreck happening in Texas. There's this slow motion train wreck that, if you're not paying attention, you're counting your cash, you're looking at you're planning your vacation, you're watching Fox News, whatever it is you're doing that's got you distracted. All the normal things that people do, right? Then you might not notice this slow moving train wreck that's been going on for a good 2 or 3 years now. And these are all recent things. Okay. These are slow motion train wrecks happening pretty much all over the planet, all at the same time, but they're slow and they're kind of subtle. And I noticed it about 3 years ago. And what tipped me off to it was we had a fire. We had a series of fires here in California. And they say, well, it was caused by lightning, and it was caused by this, and it was caused by that. Well, how it gets set isn't quite as interesting, because there's always different ways to set fires. But here's something that did change. This was the noticeable part. Not that there were fires. Forests burn all the time, son. Have you been paying attention? Oh, I've been paying attention, all right. I got family lives up in those mountains. Oh, yeah, I'm paying attention, all right. Here was the subtle thing. Here was the train wreck part of, yeah, there were fires in California. Here's the train wreck part. I saw a headline, pretty much out of nowhere, that the insurance companies that operate in California lost 20 years of profits in 2 weeks. That's kind of just a throwaway headline. It's like, who cares, man? That's why they're there, to pay out. But when I saw that headline, I didn't have to even read the article. The insurance industry that operates in California, which is all the big names, Farmers Insurance, State Farm, Mutual Life, all these different companies that operate in California. There's a lot of money in California. Did you know that? We have a lot of expensive houses, a lot of expensive real estate, big cities with big businesses, and and we have lots of problems here. Earthquakes, and now this is new. This came out of left field, fire. And the companies, the insurance industry operating in California lost 20 years worth of profits. Profits. If you know anything about capitalism, you know where this is headed. They lost 20 years worth of profits in 2 weeks, meaning the payouts they were going to have to make were going to cost them so much money that it ate into their profits for 20 years of operating in California. And I knew a couple of things already. Well, we're going to have fires like that every few years because of global heating. That's been happening, by the way. And California is not the only one. They've been having fires like that in Canada, in California, in different parts of the lower 48. They've been having fires like that all around the Mediterranean Ocean. So that's Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Turkey. And there are lots of places. I'm trying to think. Spain, yes, Spain, and there's another country. I don't think it was France, though. There was another country in that area that was having huge fires, and maybe it was Portugal. Yeah, probably was Portugal. Huge fires, and I don't mean like, wow, that fire that burned my barn down. That's terrible. Fires that were so huge and moving so fast, fires that were so, wait for it, violent. Fires that were so violent that people couldn't escape them, could not run them. They had to just leave their homes and just get in their car and just go as fast as they could. Or, as I said, in the case of Paradise, up where I have family, they couldn't escape. 89 people died in the fire in their car, escaping and failing to do so. People died in Hawaii just recently. What was the name of that city? I can't remember now. Burned to the ground in like 10 minutes. This old city on the island that had been there for 200 years. I think it was originally the capital of the indigenous people, and it had been there for hundreds of years, and it burned down in like 10 minutes and killed a bunch of people because they couldn't get away. Just like in Paradise. And my wife and I were looking at each other and saying, yeah, well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? That's a thing. Fires that are so violent, people can't escape. Fires that are so violent that it burns. Everything. The entire town burns. The entire forest burns. Everything burns. And the people in their cars burn. There are pictures from Hawaii of cars that had driven to the sea trying to escape. The cars are burnt to a crisp, and there were people in those cars. They drove to the sea to dive in the sea and couldn't get out and died in their cars 30 feet from the sea. And there were people who were in the sea who died in the sea from the heat of the fire. This is insane. This is unhinged. I have some superlatives for you. This is impossible. This is unprecedented. How did this happen? This had never happened before. Nobody was ready for this. What did we do wrong? Did we do anything wrong? And they'll say, well, it has been a drought and it has been dry. No, that's not where the violence comes from. The violence comes to you courtesy of the Earth dynamic system. The Earth is spinning up, people. And if you were in Capitola, second year in a row, people hadn't even finished repairing their businesses and homes from the previous year. Not a joke. Still in the process of remodeling their homes from the last time this happened. It happened again, back to back. And what do you think when you're standing there, you're watching this, and this community has been here for hundreds of years? These are whaling communities. These are the places where the Spanish came ashore. Okay? And what are you supposed to think when it's being just destroyed 2 years running, right out from under your nose? And what are the insurance companies going to think? That stuff was insured? Really? And they're thinking, well, that didn't pay off. And the insurance companies are getting out of California. It's hard to get insurance now in California. If you live up in the mountains, you can't get insurance for your home if you live up in the mountains at this point. Now, the state of California does have kind of an emergency fallback plan. I can't remember what it's called, Fair Plan or something like that, where you can go to the state of California and they will insure you. And it might cost a little more, but it's not a whole lot more, which is kind of interesting. How are you, state of California, going to stay in business with those kind of premiums and those kinds of policies? If the insurance industry, the global insurance industry, has abandoned large sections of California, $1 million real estate owned by rich people, okay, who can pay. And they're not even saying, pay me. They're saying, I'm out. I'm out. They're not even bothering to come back with policies and say, well, your policy just tripled or quintupled or decatupled or something. They're not even doing that. They're saying, bye. Just bailing out. They lost 20 years of profits in 2 weeks, and they're not going to do that again. They're getting out. Now, you can think what you want to about the insurance industry, and you can hate them and they're vampires and they're sucking parasites or whatever. That's not true, by the way. But you could think that. You could think that they're just, in it for the money. Well, they are, but there's nothing wrong with that, right? Market forces, right? Profits, capitalism, right? They're like the canary in the coal mine, as people like to say. And they're saying there's something wrong. They don't have to know what it is. They can be climate change deniers. They can say, oh, well, we don't know what it is, but we're watching it play out and we're getting out of the way. That's what they're doing. And how many times are they going to reinsure Capitola for property damage from sea waves? Will they ever do it ever again? What are those people going to do? Do they just close up shop? Well, if they're going to close up shop, it's because of the violence that is now present in the Earth dynamic system. The Earth dynamic system has become violent. It is violent, people. And there are going to be places on this Earth where you can't live, not because of sea level rise, which will take hundreds of years, and not because of even air temperatures, because I got air conditioning, and I got air conditioning in my garage and in my Tesla and at the shopping mall and at my place of work, and I'll just stay in the air conditioning. Okay, well, that kind of works for you. Does it work for anybody else? Does that work for your neighbors? And what happens if the electricity goes out? Because everybody's demanding electricity. Okay, well, then you end up wrapped in the violence. And it turns out that the slow sea level rise and the gradual increase in temperatures and the global average temperature and building up the electric grid for all the expected anticipated air conditioning requirements and all these slow gradual things, that's not actually the story. I mean, it is the story. It's because it's not going to stop. The story now is, I'm here to tell you, because I'm sensing it. I'm sensing it. I'm feeling it. I'm seeing it. Okay. I'm seeing it. It's out there. It's coming. And the word you're looking for here is violence. It's violent. And what makes it that way? I mean, I'm saying it's violent. Do I have a mechanism? Because that's really what it has to come down to, right? Where do those waves come from? Well, they came from the wind. Okay, fine. Where did the wind come from? Well, the wind comes from the usual thing, temperature differences and pressure differences and the wind and the isobars and the upper level winds and the lower level winds and the shear and and the mountain formations and it deflects and it raises and then it does this and then there's a thing and okay, yeah, fine, all right, yeah, a lot of energy, right? Yeah, well, yeah, sure. The wind weighs a lot and it's hard to move all these air masses around, so yeah, there's a lot of energy. So where's that? So maybe that's the cause, all this excess energy in the system, right? Yeah, well, I suppose so, because you can't have wind without energy, right? Differentials, and try moving a freight train. It takes energy, right? You got to put the diesel in it or the coal or the whatever and move that thing. Air is the same way. You're going to move an air mass. You're going to have huge winds. Hurricane winds are going to blow in the trees and the reporter with these, struggling to stay upright. Yeah, well, that's energy. Where's that coming from? Now, if you ask a meteorologist where that energy is coming from, They'll go, duh, duh, duh. I don't know. Duh. Um, and if they paid attention in that particular part of their meteorology training, they'll say, it comes from the sun. That's right. Good for you, Sparky. Yes, it comes from the sun. All the energy on the planet Earth, in particular in the atmosphere, not so much the mantle and the crustal dynamics, but certainly all the energy in the atmosphere. The causes are meteorology, the surface manifestations of the winds and the waves and the rain and the thunder and the lightning and all those things, right? The winds that go like this and hurricanes and the cyclones, all that stuff, all that energy comes from the sun. And so some people will say, yes, and the reason why the Earth system is becoming more dynamic, except they won't say it that way because they're not system scientists. And so what they'll say instead is, yes, and the reason why the weather is becoming more violent is because the sun is hotter and it's heating the Earth, and there's more energy now on the Earth, and the winds are the energy, and the cyclones and the rain and the thunder and the lightning. It's all the sun. To which I say, no, it's not. The sun's output hasn't changed. I mean, it varies a little bit, right? And there are long-term swings that we can track on the sun's output. But if you plot them on the proper scale, they're just tiny wiggles in the sun's output, just a few percent. So where's all that energy really coming from? Well, I'll tell you, because I'm not a climate change denier. Although I hate the word climate change, I use it because other people use it. Okay, I'm trying to be accessible here. Because I'm not a climate change denier, I understand where that energy is coming from. Yes, it's all coming from the sun. That's the only place it comes from. But what's happening is it's not escaping, it's accumulating. So yeah, if the sun suddenly got brighter and it flared up and it got bigger and the flames coming off the sun and the radiation streaming towards Earth and battering the Earth and heating the atmosphere, okay, then yeah, okay, we would have global heating from the sun becoming completely unhinged, right? But the sun isn't becoming unhinged. It varies a little bit in a predictable way, by the way, and nothing unusual is happening now in a predictable way. It goes up, goes down, it goes up, it goes down, and it's not going anywhere. It's not going this way, it's not going that way. It's just going up and down, up and down, up and down, like this, in a predictable way. Kind of like our seasons are predictable. The sun has its seasons, and they're long. They're 7 years and 11 years and some combination of years, and but they're predictable within reason. We kind of know what those seasons are. It's like there's a pendulum inside the sun that swings back and forth. And we can't see it because it's not really a pendulum. It's something else that's going on, but it acts like a pendulum. And after you get enough data, you start to see these predictable swings. Just like if you had enough data on a pendulum swinging, you say, oh yeah, I see what it's doing. It's repeating itself. So it repeats itself. We don't know what that is meant necessarily. I certainly don't know what it is because I'm not an astronomer or anything else. But people know these things, and I trust them to know the right thing and to report the right thing. And so there are swings in the sun's behavior, but those swings in the sun's behavior, those predictable periodic swings in the sun's behavior, do not correlate with anything happening in the Earth system. The Earth system is getting hotter. Period. That's what it's doing. It's not getting hotter and then colder and then hotter and then colder. It's getting hotter. That's the trend. It's getting hotter. And something else that the Earth system is experiencing is the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is increasing. And it's increasing because the amount of fossil fuels we're burning is increasing. Okay? So you say, well, correlation is not causation. Oh, yes, it is. Physics works. And CO2 is a greenhouse gas. It traps heat and enhances the natural greenhouse effect of our atmosphere. And when you do that, you collect heat because that's what that means. And heat is energy. And the CO2 is going up like this. It's not going down. It's going up like this. And the average temperature of the Earth is going up like this. And the expectation is that those two would go together like that. And our annual consumption of fossil fuels, meaning how much we dig out of the ground and how much we sell and how much we pipeline and how much we ship and how much we car and truck and plane and boat and everything else, it's also going up like this. Okay. And the CO2, once it's in the atmosphere, it stays there. Some disagreement on how long it stays there. Maybe it stays there a couple of hundred years. Maybe it stays there a couple of thousand, a couple of million. But, between friends, what's the difference of a couple of hundred years? Point is, by the time we get around to doing anything, we're stuck with it. It's up there. You and I are stuck with it. And 6 generations down the road, at least, if not hundreds of generations down the road, are stuck with it. It's up there. It's there now. It's going to stay there. And, well, la-dee-da. Now what? But the evidence is that it is already enough today, right now, in the atmosphere. Today's current Earth system parameters is sufficient to create unimaginable, unexpected, unprecedented, superlative levels of violence. Violence. Yeah, there will be hot days. Yeah, there will be polar vortices that bring down the cold air from the Arctic. Yeah, there will be, hurricanes. And yes, the seas will be anomalously hot and all these things will happen. And then maybe because of some of those things, or maybe for something we are not even looking at yet. That's my fear. Something we're not even looking at yet. It's hard to even imagine. But I'm getting the sense that there's things that we've missed. For all of our satellites and all of our binoculars and all of our anemometers and all of our ocean going vessels and the sea buoys floating up and down, the Argo sea buoys, for all that, there's something we're missing. Because the world, unexpectedly, not in anyone's model, not in anyone's paper, not in anyone's prediction. I've never heard this mentioned. I've never seen any discussion of this. Violence. The world is lapsing into violence. Wow. And that's what I said 6 months ago when I saw what happened to the Antarctic sea ice. And people were going like this. I sat back and I said, wow, would you look at that? What is that about? Oh, it's El Nino. No, it's not. I know what El Nino does. It doesn't do that. How can you know what El Nino does? Because it's there in the data. There's El Nino, there's El Nino, there's El Nino. And what the hell is this? Because those are El Nino. And what is this? That's not El Nino. These are El Nino. We got data on that. There's El Nino, Nino, okay. Oh, these ones are really strong. And these ones are kind of weak, kind of like what we're having now. But these are all El Ninos. And then there's this. What? You got a name for that? Gonna call that Bob? Steve? What is that? And the UK started naming their storms, and they've had 9 of them. And every one of them destroys every single thing that it comes in contact with. 80-mile-an-hour winds, 100-mile-an-hour winds. I was looking at a broadcast just today, and they had winds coming ashore in the UK right now as I speak, probably. And they were the scale, the wind scale ended 100 miles an hour. Violence. I never heard of the UK having named storms. That's a new thing. Why are they doing that? I didn't know they had 100-mile-an-hour. That's hurricane force winds. Did you know that? That's a hurricane force wind. That's some violent shit right there. In fact, 100 miles an hour was way into hurricane territory. Violence. It's violent. What the hell is going on? Capitola destroyed 2 years running. And prior to that, nothing. All of a sudden, 2 years running. Bang, bang. Thank you very much. You're done. The insurance companies are fleeing California. Bang, bang, bang. You're done. We're out. 20 years of profits eaten up in 2 weeks. Bye, Felicia. And last year, something happened in the Antarctica. What the hell was that? What? Did you see this? What is this? What do you think this is? What did we miss? I didn't know this was coming. Did you know this was coming? Then where'd this come from? We've been looking at the data and the satellites and the Argo floats and the ships going back and forth. And we've got people down there in the Antarctica that watch everything from the penguins all to the krill, to the whales, to the atmospheric conditions and the melting ice and melting glaciers and the whales and the Larsen A and the B and the C. This wasn't in that. We didn't see this coming. Where did this come from? What is it? What the hell just happened? That's where we're at right now, people. Where did this come from? Where are these storms coming from? Why is the California coast falling into the sea? Why are the fires so violent that the firefighters can't even fight them? Why is all of Canada on fucking fire? What happened? I don't actually know what happened. I really don't. I don't think anybody else does either. They're going to have to study the hell out of this one. But I can tell you what it is. I don't know where it came from, but I can tell you what it is. I can put a word on this. All of it. The fire in Hawaii, and the fire in Paradise, and the fires in California, and the fires in Canada, and the 9 named storms coming ashore in the UK, and Hawaii burning, and the insurance companies leaving. I can tell you what that is. I can put a name on that for you. I can name that for you. I know what it is. I don't know where it came from, but it's here. It's here. It's now. It's here. It's been here for years. I've been feeling it coming. And I know what it is. I put a name on it now. I can pin a tail on this donkey. And what it is it's violence. Violence. We're in trouble. I can't even explain to you. The words don't exist in this language. There's not a sentence I can construct using the words available to me. And I could even crack a thesaurus and get more words, but there's nothing in language that allows me to explain to you how big of trouble we're in. That would explain it in the way you could comprehend. Violence. Now, I could get mythological on you, right? I could get mythological on you, and I could say, well, all right, folks, I kind of know where this violence is coming from. You're not going to like the answer, and you're going to laugh. And unless you're really religious, you're going to say, I've lost my marbles. Okay, I can tell you where the violence is coming from. The earth is sick of our retarded shit and is now trying to kill us. We've been stupid. We've been violent. We have been selfish and greedy. And the planet has noticed. And it's just about to kill our retarded ass with violence. It's going to be violent. It's not going to be a mother's kiss. It's going to be, we're going to get an ass kicking. Our asses are going to be thoroughly kicked. We are being kicked in the ass. The planet is turning violent. And like a caged tiger, it is going to kill us. Like a caged tiger. It's going to find that opening, and it's going to squeeze out of that cage, and it's going to come looking for us. And it's going to kill us. The planet's going to kill us. The violence is there. There it is. You want nature red in tooth and claw? Well, look around. I'm not even an end times Christian. I'm not even saying this is the end of the world according to biblical prophecy. I'm not saying any of that stuff. I'm saying that the earth is turning violent. And I know, and it's because of global heating, and therefore it's not going to stop. In fact, dare I say it, it's going to get worse, a lot worse, magnitudes worse. These are just opening days of the violence, people. These are just the opening blows of the ass kicking we're about to get. And if you want to get mythological and spiritual about it, yes, the earth is tired of our shit. And we're about to get our asses seriously kicked. Seriously kicked to the curb. So when you're seeing these hurricanes spin up out of nowhere and come ashore in hours, and just wreck everything and everybody. And this never happened before. And we'll never be able to rebuild this town. And the tourists will never come back. And we're gone. We're done. We're finished. When you see that happening, which happened in Mexico last summer, when you see that happening, violence. It's not a hurricane. It's violence. It's not a storm. It's violence. It's not a fire anymore. It's violence. Everything is turning against us. And if you're religious, well, pick your deity of choice. It really doesn't matter at this point. Buckle up.